Wonderful, and I'd like to again welcome everyone to this Wisconsin Special Education Mediation System webinar, How to Conduct Friendly and Productive IEP Meetings. At this point, I will turn things over to my co-presenter, Nissan Barlev.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the presentation on how to conduct friendly and productive IEP meeting. This presentation was developed with feedback from many parents, educators, as well as the mediator from the Wisconsin Special Ed Mediation System. We call it in short WSEMS. The notes for this presentation are made available to leaders of parent organization, special ed directors, building principals, in order for them to train their own staff. We also highly recommend the training of blended audiences of parents and educators by a joint team of a parent leader and special ed director, just like today's presentation, a parent by a parent and an educator. As mentioned before, this presentation is based on feedback from many parents and educators, including the Wisconsin Council of Administrators of Special Services, Wisconsin Facets, Wisconsin Statewide Parent Education Initiative, as well as WSEMS roster mediators and many others. Presentation is copyrighted by WSEMS because it contains a delicate yet an extremely important balance of parents and educators' feedback. It is critical that when you use this training that you stay true to the text as written. As we move to the next slide, so this slide addresses the purpose of the presentation, which is to share feedback from the many parents and educators who are surveyed about their experiences in IEP meetings, both what worked and what didn't. This presentation hopes to support both parents and districts in developing strong, productive relationship and effective forward-looking conversation about the needs of students with disabilities. This presentation can also be done in 1 hour if you go straight through it, but you can also can take longer with added activity and discussion when you have more time with a group on which you may be presenting. Today, we will be skipping this slide and staying to within 1 hour in respectful of your time. Courtney? So as we move to the next slide, thank you. The presentation covers 4 focus areas: people, process, outcome, and follow through. And the speaker notes include a description of each area and explain that each area will include brief introduction, comments by both district and parents, and tips that will help create a productive, friendly IEP. Each tip page has a light bulb in the upper right side corner. And our goal in this presentation is to summarize the critical issues and topic for each section. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Nissan. And just to let everybody know, I have loaded the handouts into the handout pod in your GoToWebinar dashboard. You're going to want to make sure, if you want to keep any of those handouts, that you do download those at some point during the presentation, because those will not get saved with the recording. So we're going to start by talking about the notion of people and getting the right people together, not just who the law mandates as far as attendance at the IEP meeting. And this is really crucial for building trust and rapport between the parents and the districts. It's always important to find out if there are people who can help make a connection between the parent and the district. Have a real knowledge of the student, know about all of the available services and resources, and have the skills to handle difficult situations. Finding out who the parents already trust and would like to invite to the meeting, whether it's teachers, administrators, friends, or family members, that's a really important component for an effective environment for the meeting. In each focus area section of today's workshop, we are going to share with you some actual comments from parents and or school staff that we received when we did our survey a few years back. The comments on this slide are related to the topic of people. And the comments here, I'll read them just in the event anyone doesn't have visual. The first one says, the most help during the IEP was personnel there who could answer my questions. They knew the content of courses and could explain their significance in the big scheme of my child's education. The second comment says, it was so nice to have my child's teacher there because she is the one person who I feel I can talk to. And then last, we have, there was no one that I could connect with. All of the professionals took over.
Thank you, Courtney. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. This slide emphasizes the value of having the student attend the meeting, having staff present who have positive relationships with the student, and the importance of finding out before the meeting if there are any special language or other special needs of the students or parents. And to make sure if the student is present to use positive, understandable language. And I'll turn things back to Nissan.
Thank you, Courtney. So as Courtney mentioned, these are comments from participants at IP meeting. So the first one is if in front of my child, the IP teacher said that my child is far behind academically and that her reading is at the second grade level. The teacher said that she cannot teach my daughter new skills. My 16-year-old exploded into crying and refused to come back to the meeting. Another comment by a parent, during the IP meeting, the teacher explained to my child in terms he understood the progress he has made and also talked to him about goals and objectives so that he'll know what he is going to do to be working on during the coming year. And the next slide addresses creating connection. So if a student or family is new to the district, it is important to create a positive connection and reach out to them before the meeting. Could be done either in person, by phone, or email. When they come to the building, meet them in the office before the meeting. During the meeting, make sure to talk directly to the student, ask the student questions so they don't feel left out of the conversation. And the next slide has additional comments. Things heated up pretty quickly, and no one at the meeting was really prepared to deal with it. We need more expertise in how to deal with conflict itself. Parents need to feel safe, said another participant, and heard. Sometimes, when the power or aggressiveness of one parent is strong, it can be very uncomfortable. All professionals need some training in dealing with difficult conversation. And another comment said, I have knowledge in special education. I do not have knowledge in dealing with highly emotional or difficult situation. That knowledge would have helped me. So as we go to the next slide, and this slide suggests that to feel safe and comfortable at the IP meeting, participants need to obtain certain practical skills as understanding the sources of conflict, managing difficult conversation, etc. Our website, the WSEMS website, and you can see it on the slide. For those without the visual, it's the WSEMS.us. It has many resources that can help with this issue. In that, there is a multimedia tab that includes several videos on dealing with conflict situation as well as high emotions, as well as publications. So you can click the tab of multimedia, or you can click the publication tab. So as we move to the next slide, one of the things that we heard from the feedback we received from parents and educators that we surveyed was that they did not know what to do when emotion become difficult during IP meetings. This slide provides some suggestion to help with emotions. Also, for additional information, you can again access our website, WSEMS.us, and in the multimedia tab, there is a video when conflict arises, working with emotion. It was presented by a well-known dispute resolution specialist around the world, and we're very proud to have her recorded on our website. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Nissan. And so as Nissan mentioned, I just wanted to highlight there are these what we call optional slides throughout. This is if there's more time or you want the session to really have a lot of dialogue. These are just some prompts in here for discussion. And so for our purposes, we are going to just kind of zip through when we have those optional slides. So the next section that we're going to talk about is about process, and that is the process for preparing for the meeting and the process that actually unfolds during the meeting itself. The focus is for our discussion is how a thorough preparation for the IEP meeting can really help it run more smoothly, and how during a meeting certain techniques can be used to build connection and to hopefully lead to more productive conversations. So on this slide, we talk a little bit about how important the beginning is for the outcome of the meeting. And we can sometimes forget that basic guidelines that can lead to a more productive meeting do exist. Remember that the beginning of the meeting will impact the end. So care needs to be taken at every stage of the process. Setting a positive tone for the meeting from the very first moment is truly important. Separating people from the problem, what that means is that the IEP team members should stay focused together on solving what is best for the student. It shouldn't be us versus them or parents against the district. It's really about coming together, working as a team, treating each other as important team members. These are some of the essential components of a successful IEP team meeting. To illustrate the importance of understanding why someone is expressing what they are expressing, will definitely give more insight into how to creatively solve the questions. And again, as Nissan mentioned, on the WSEMS website, there is a treasure trove of videos and resources that talk about conflict and communication and emotion. And so we'd really encourage you to check those out. I will toss it back to Nissan then.
Thank you, Courtney. So as we mentioned earlier, we had great feedback in our survey from many educators and parents. This slide highlights some parents' comments about things that they appreciated experiences before the meeting. As you can see, 55% of those responding indicated they had been given at least a month notice of an IEP meeting. 76% said they were asked to suggest convenient times and dates. And 65% stated they were asked if there was anything special about the child's academic or functional performance that they would like to discuss at the meeting. And as we move to the next slide, we have again participants' comments. One said, I appreciated that the district contacted me prior to the meeting and really stressed that I was an important part of the team. It felt like they really wanted my input. And another comment, by far the most helpful thing has been to meet with teachers and providers ahead of time so we are not bogged down with minutia and can focus on longer term goals and broader perspective. And the last comment, I felt the district already had the entire IEP written in their heads before I got there. And the next slide, additional parent comments. I always ask for a brief meeting and an IEP draft before the meeting to kind of pre-plan. Staff is usually willing to do this, but I wouldn't if I didn't ask. And another comment, we did not receive timely information as to who would be at the meeting, the district brought a therapist that we did not know about. And the last comment, we received written notification that several staff that work with our child were going to be present at the IEP. In actuality, only the lead special ed teacher was present. This was misleading, in our opinion. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Nissan. I'm going to share with you just a few more comments. The first one says, I was notified about the IEP meeting the day before. The second comment says, we have never finished a meeting in the time allotted. It would be very helpful to have team meetings in advance of the actual IEP meetings to begin developing the present level and goals, so we are not always forced to have another meeting, which inevitably is not a good time for us. These last three slides show a wide range of parent experiences related to the preparation that goes on for an IEP meeting. Some comments, expressed that people had felt as if much of the planning had been done without them. And then there were others who had a strong feeling that they were an informed, valued, and contributing team member. In our survey, districts shared quite a few examples of things that they have done before the meeting to establish trust and connection with the parents, and we'd like to share these with you. For example, a draft IEP agenda for the meeting that is shared in advance of the meeting. Also, some districts do a parent questionnaire on concerns, strengths, where parents can lay out their thoughts or questions. We've included in your handouts an example of one of these called a positive student profile, and that's a great way to put some information down about the student and share that with the IEP team in advance of the actual meeting. This next slide related to contact prior to the meeting. It emphasizes the value of having contact with all IEP team members before the actual meeting. And that really helps to reinforce and stress the value of the input that they'll be bringing. And this should include the student. You can ask about agenda items, the date and time of the meeting, if any accommodations are needed. It's just a really nice way to kind of start the process. And then in scheduling the meeting, it's critical to allow time for a potential second meeting within the statutory timelines. And that ensures that team members aren't going to feel rushed to complete a document that may not be as good as it could be if they had enough time. Thanks, Nissan.
Thank you. So we believe it's really important for parents to truly understand the IEP process. So to assist parents with understanding the format, the protocol of the IEP, some suggestion would include explaining the district IEP form and the IEP process before the meeting, either by phone or in person. Sharing a draft IEP form with the team members in advance, if it's available, or an actual IEP blank form, so they can see the various topics that will be discussed at the IEP meeting. Also, another way to increase awareness and information about the IEP is to share a document that both Wisconsin Facets and the Council of Administrative Special Services were involved several years ago in putting together, called the Special Ed in Plain Language. It's a document that the biggest chapter, the IEP component, has 4 sections, basically. What the law says, what the law means, and what parents need to know and do, and what school need to know and do. And this is based on, so each of those boxes, those include different IEP topics. So it's a simple, in plain language way to understand the process from the referral all the way to the placement and beyond. as we move exchanging information. So this slide is about the importance of both district and parents sharing IEP-related reports with each other before the meeting in order to avoid surprises at a meeting. And this includes both educational material as well as medical reports. To give everyone time to read and process the information before the meeting that's why information has to occur previously in order to avoid having to read long reports at the meeting. If a report wasn't shared in advance or wasn't available in advance, we recommend to bring copies to all team members at the meeting so they all have access to the same information. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Nissan. So on this slide, we talk about, again, having the right people at the meeting. It's really important that there are no surprises at the IEP meeting about who will attend. That means the invitation should list everyone who will be coming. The parent needs to let the district know if they're bringing someone else, and the district also should let the parent know if any team members can't be there so that they may be able to reschedule. On this next slide, we have some data from our survey about the notion of feeling welcome during the IEP meeting. And again, I'm just going to read some of these statistics to you. So according to the survey we did, only 21% were met and welcomed outside of the meeting room by the district. And that's 21% of the parents who took the survey were met and welcomed outside of the meeting room by the district. Less than 6% of parents were provided water in the meeting. And some of the parents indicated that the first time that they met some of the district personnel was when they were sitting across the table from them during the meeting. So obviously those statistics kind of make us think about what it means to feel comfortable during an IEP meeting. So this slide includes some suggestions that parents and school staff who were surveyed said, really made them feel comfortable in the meeting. And it's funny because, sometimes something as simple as just water gets overlooked. But it's true that people function better when they're hydrated. The brain requires a good supply of nutrients to function at top capacity. So it makes good sense to offer water or even, small snacks. We know that last year, but even potentially this year, some IEP meetings are still happening via technology instead of in person. So then it becomes critical to make sure that everyone is comfortable with the technology that's being used for the IEP meeting. The next slide, we talk a little bit about first impressions. So this slide has some ideas to ensure that everyone is going to feel welcome and respected, including having someone the parents know meet them in the office. We suggest asking them how they'd like to be addressed. Is it Mr. or Mrs. or Ms.? Is it by their first name? And then just making sure that everyone in the meeting gets introduced and that people understand what their role is going to be like during the meeting. On this slide, we have some comments to share with you about the actual meeting itself. So this one said, the parent used the IEP meeting as an opportunity to vent about the district. We didn't talk about the IEP itself until 2 hours into our meeting. The next quote says, I appreciate that the case manager kept the meeting focused on the goals. And then the final comment says, higher level personnel who did not know my child seemed to be making the decisions. The teacher, who was the most knowledgeable, did not seem to have much power. On this next slide, we want to share with you some tips about beginning the meeting, which can include summarizing the meeting goals. What do you hope to accomplish during your time together? Stressing the need to focus on the students' needs. reviewing the agenda and the time frames. And while agenda are time frames are certainly important, it's also important to note that there should be some amount of flexibility in the structure of the overall meeting so that the meeting can address what needs to get addressed. And then potentially mentioning the use of a parking lot if things come up during the meeting that are important, but they're not really IEP related issues. A few more tips on this next slide for the beginning of the meeting. We suggest establishing guidelines for the meeting, and doing that can really make a meeting more productive. The case manager can suggest some guidelines and see if they're acceptable to the group, or the team can work together to develop the meeting guidelines as a team. Thank you. Nissan?
Thank you, Courtney. So we have additional comments by participants. It was nice that the district talked about my child's strength as well as his challenges. It made me feel that my child was a student, not a problem. And the next comment was our IP meeting was a positive experience. We were in half circle facing white pads on easels. The strength of my son were listed in big, bright colors. True strengths, not just what he enjoyed doing. This set the tone for the entire meeting. They saw him for who he was and not for the challenges he had. This also allowed the team to focus on how to best use those strengths to problem solve other areas of concern. The chair facing the boards also felt to me that the entire team was focused on him, my son, not on disagreements among the team. And as we move to the next slides, it deals with working together at a meeting. And as you can see from the slide, it encourages a participatory exercise at IP meeting where team is encouraged to put up 2 sheets of flip chart with one sheet titled strength, the other one challenges, starting with strength. Ask each participant to identify 1 or 2 of the child's strength. As you can see from the slide, then the participants review the list and indicate how the data informs them about the student. This should be a quick introductory activity to focus on the student and show balance between strength and challenges. So the next slide has additional comments from participants. The district had so many people there that I felt I had very little time to talk. They were nice to me, but I felt as though I hardly got to say anything. And the last comment, we appreciated it when we were asked to speak early in the IP meeting about our concern and new goals without having to demand to do so. So here are some tips for communication at a meeting. And as you can see from the slide, that starting with open-ended questions. And it's really important for the IP manager to make sure that to allow balance of talk time between district and parents. Even though there may be, well, we know for sure there are always more district personnel, it's really important to balance the time between parents and staff. And record the discussion points and options, identify the agreement, the disagreement, have a scribe so that the case manager can focus on the parents and not writing the notes. And as Courtney mentioned before, it should include a list of parking lot issues. These are things that need to be talked about, but may not fit in the IP meeting format. Thank you, Courtney. So here we have some additional comments. The issue in the IP meeting were more appropriate for mediation, said one of the participants. The issue were broader and came from a bad relationship between the district and the parent. And the next comment was trust could only be developed through a neutral third party. Glad we decided to go to mediation. So this slide stresses that what to do if a meeting touches on issues that are much broader that can be covered in the IEP meeting. It suggests maybe another type of meeting might be useful, something called IEP facilitation or mediation that we're going to be describing in the next couple of slides. So this slide is a referral to IEP facilitation. So this includes a tip of how to request IEP facilitation when there is a difficult relationship between the parents and school staff, when there appears to be a lack of trust, or a need to move the process forward to get the IEP completed. And you should have the handout that Courtney included, the WSEMS brochure, as well as IEP facilitation form. That's also available on the WSEMS.us website. And the next slide deals with another process available through WSEMS is mediation. And this tip slide suggests that a request to mediation may be appropriate when parents and staff have a specific or multiple dispute disagreement. For example, if there is a disagreement about the need for a paraprofessional, or a disagreement about the amount of time the student is in the regular classroom versus the pull-out program in the school district. So when there is a specific dispute, that's a very appropriate topic to go to mediation if it cannot be resolved at the IEP meeting. It is important, and again, the handouts would include a request for mediation form. It is important to point out that there's no such thing as a mediated IEP. There is an IEP facilitation process, and there is a mediation process. Each option follows their own process and their own goals. IEP facilitation is simply focused on developing an IEP document, and the mediation is focused on resolving specific dispute or multiple disputes. The next slide will basically show the intake process and how things are processed through WSEMS. So as you can see on the orange arrow, there's a request for information, or it is reddish. I'm sorry, it's reddish. Request information received by Gia Pionic, our intake coordinator. And she does the screening, analyzing the information comes in, and provide information, education to parents about the various processes available through WSEMS. This is provided feedback to parents who then make the choice on their own if they choose to go to IEP facilitation, to mediation, or to the resolution process. There is also a video, one more thing on that. There is also a video, which is about 9.5 minutes long, that can be used with this slide. It's called Effective Participation in Mediation and IEP Facilitation. And again, it is available on our WSEMS website. That's, again, if you press on the multimedia tab, you'll find the video presented by one of our international expert in dispute resolution, Nina Meyerding. You will enjoy listening to that video. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Nissan. So the third focus area of today's training is what we call the outcome. And that's really the importance of developing a concrete and specific IEP with a clear and ongoing communication plan and measurable results. So the goal of the IEP meeting is to complete an IEP with specific and measurable annual goals. And it should be written in language that's clear to all team members, and that also includes any parent concerns on the IEP form. If the parent disagrees with the IEP, it is still the district's responsibility to complete the IEP. It might be helpful if the district took some time, though, to provide more information about services and supports being suggested, or to discuss next steps. So if the team is interested in pursuing IEP facilitation, which Nissan just talked about, or mediation, or some other form of dispute resolution option, that's a great thing to discuss during the meeting. So on this next slide, we have two more comments. I'll read them to you. The first one says, it is 2 weeks since the meeting and the IEP is still in the draft form. We have not heard from the district since the meeting. Not sure if they're going to follow through. The second quote says, I did not get a rough copy of what was discussed, so I could compare with the final copy. I did not get a follow-up call or email to go over the IEP to make sure that I understood. So on this slide, we have a few tips if the IEP was not able to be completed. And so we would recommend having the case manager review what the team completed so far, and then identify which agenda items still need to be completed and what type of follow-up is going to be needed before the next meeting. Then the next IEP team meeting needs to get scheduled within the statutory timelines so that everything happens in line with how the law prescribes. On this slide, we have some tips if the IEP was completed during that meeting. So the first thing is to create a communication plan, or to make sure that there's a communication plan in place that's going to ensure regular and consistent communication amongst the parties. To follow up after the IEP meeting. That's really a key ingredient to building and maintaining positive relationships between all of the team members. And then we've got some suggestions on the slide about the frequency of those communications. Really kind of depends on what types of things are going to be discussed, whether it's short term or more long term. Okay, a few more tips if the IEP was completed during the meeting. Really important to make sure parents receive a copy of the IEP at the meeting or very shortly thereafter. And if possible, give a specific date. So if the copy of the IEP is not going to be provided at the conclusion of the meeting, when can the parents expect to have that by? If for some reason it's going to be late in getting delivered to the parents, it's really helpful to call or email and explain what's happening, why it's late, when it can be expected. Again, it's really important to be specific in the IEP as to when communication regarding the IEP goals will be reviewed throughout the duration of the year. Nissan.
Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, so this slide identifies IEP provisions. This slide addresses the need of IEP clarity. For example, when committing the district to provide special ed services, to make sure to specify the amount of time per session, how often per week, and where will these services be provided. And again, as Courtney mentioned before, the specificity is really critical here. As we move on to the next slide. So this slide encourages IEP participants to think about the underlying interests of the position that people take or parents take. What are the parent interests in advocating for a certain position? Because once you know these interests, it is much easier to find acceptable solutions to that issue. And as we move to the next slide, it is important for IEP team member to consider both long-term and short-term needs of students as they are prepared for life after high school. The next slide address highlights the importance of connecting parents to student learning activities. This could be the focus of family engagement in the district, of maintaining a positive relationship with the parents throughout the years in which the student is in school, as we discuss its importance for this relationship earlier. And the next slide indicates that IEP goals should continue to include student self-advocacy skill. And while the student is still learning how to advocate for himself or herself, the provision of district resources should continue. For example, even if the student is not advocating for himself to use a calculator, the district has to find a way to provide it for him if he needs it and if it's appropriate at that time. Thank you, Courtney.
Okay, and we are going to move on to the fourth and final area of the workshop today, which we call follow through.
So, the fourth and final area is follow through. By building strong, trusting relationship in each of these first three stages area, a long-term positive relationship can develop between parents and the district. However, all the hard work of the IEP team can be destroyed if there is limited or no follow-through. It's important to keep a positive contact throughout the year. If the goals appear to be difficult to achieve, communication with IEP team is essential. IEP team can decide to review and revise an IEP if the student does not show progress. And we need to emphasize progress is most important. Progress is the foundation of free, appropriate public education. Student must show progress or else IEP team have to come back and find another way to achieve that progress. Thank you, Courtney. As we move to the next slide, which has comments about follow through. One comment says, do what the team has agreed to and what is in the IEP. If you can't, then let me know. It becomes very difficult to trust the people and trust it with my child learning when the IEP is not followed. And another comment says, there was no follow-up from school staff after the meeting. Each year, I have to request a copy of the IEP. I ask for a progress report on IEP goals, and I'm told the IEP satisfied that progress report. My child's report card does not list progress notes on any IEP goals. I received one email, no text, just an attachment with a complete negative overview from the case manager, and it did not address specific goals. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Nissan. So this slide, obviously, when we're talking about follow through, communication is huge. So these are some tips related to communication. Again, having the case manager call the parent about a week after the IEP is sent to the parent to see if there are any questions. You can talk about the communication plan for the future. And if the IEP was not able to be sent to the parent in the time frame that was promised, it's really important for the district to contact the parent, explain the reason for the delay, and then when they can expect to receive the IEP document, and then do follow-up again after they receive the IEP. So we are getting to the end of our presentation. We really hope that you have found this training to be useful. We hope there are some ideas and suggestions and tips that no matter whether you're a parent, whether you're an educator, whether you are affiliated with some other type of organization that will be helpful for you. We hope that you will share some of the content of this training, either with your own staff or with other parents that you know. And truthfully, we understand that some of the tips that we've suggested today involve more time. But ultimately, what we believe is that investing the appropriate amount of time and energy in a thoughtful planning process that has solid communication protocols, when you're having positive contacts amongst team members, is ultimately going to save time and set the stage for positive relationships for years to come between the IEP team members. This slide highlights just a few resources and links. I've also listed the link to the website in the chat, as well as the name of the publication, Special Education in Plain Language. You can get that off of the WSEMS website as well. But these are some great resources and places to go for more information. And then we include a note here. Again, we recognize that virtual IEP meetings, which were really kind of the bread and butter for most of last year, are definitely not happening as frequently as they had been. But if you are still involved with virtual IEP meetings, DPI did a webinar, and there are some resources specific to the virtual IEP process that we would encourage you to check out. So that brings us to the end. I've put the link to the evaluation in the chat if you would be so kind as to send us your feedback on today's training. And we will just pause for a moment. I don't see any questions in the queue, but in the event that anyone has any, we will hang on here. I am going to stop the recording at this point.